Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for Technical Talks, our webinar series. Today's topic, Streambank Stabilization, and our special guest is Don Thieman, backed by popular demand or
Hi, everybody.
A lot of requests.
Thanks, everybody, for getting on today. Hope you're healthy. Hope you're happy. This is a topic that I enjoy big time. Done a lot of Streambank work over the years, and so Bill asked me, and I was excited to do it. So,
Holdings. Don mentioned a couple of months ago that we are the largest family-owned business in our industry, which is pretty exciting. Look forward to celebrating that and enjoying it and helping you guys reap the benefits of it. So we are locally owned. You see 4 logos right there for Quick Supply, ASP, Bowman, and Cascade, but we're still a family business. Every location operates like a family. I'm actually down in Fenton, Missouri, St. Louis right now. And I was just telling Don, I really appreciate the banter and the camaraderie that I've experienced over the last couple of days. Every location that I get to go to, Don and I get to go to all of our locations with all of our companies. You just feel that family atmosphere and absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And you know, what makes a lot of fun for us also ends up being fun for our customers. So I think it's a good deal all the way around. Which
is a pretty unique challenge when you have over 15,000 customers. I should update this slide. We have tons of warehouse staff, truck drivers. We're experts at logistics, a lot of experience in the business, but to even be that size and to have such a large footprint as we do here, as you see on the map, but to still be a family-oriented business, it's a real blessing and really something we really enjoy. All these different locations, we actually have some warehouses that are not only strategically located for you guys near your projects, but for us. We now have, with a lot of effort from Don and a lot of people at the Hale Holdings companies, have connected all these companies in a way that we share information, we share products, we share the advantages of having such a big footprint, but yet they're all interconnected. We are able to be very responsive to people's needs. It's been awesome.
Yeah, we like to think we're nimble.
Yeah, nimble. Site solutions, we cover a lot of them. We're using the Technical Talk series this fall to try to touch on different categories. And today we're talking about Streambank Stabilization. These are the usual pictures I show and introducing our company because we have a lot of different solutions that we can put on every project. So without you having to order a cargo ship full or a train car full or a semi-load of one product, your contractor gets to specifically pick what they need, when they need it, where they need it. And that makes us nimble.
Yep.
Oh, what's coming back next year?
Clean and Green.
By popular demand,
yes.
Clean and Green is back. And for the ASP and Quick Supply folks, that name, you don't even have to tell people what it is. They know what it is. But for our Bowman and Cascade customers, you maybe have had a glimpse of Clean and Green, at least in Denver area. But we are now going to hit all the cities you see here on the map next March. And we're very excited to bring that back. It's a full day of presentations, interaction with our vendors that have booths set up in the area. Awesome networking opportunity. Almost every one of those locations has over 100 attendees. And it's one of the biggest events in our industry in the country, really.
And at least from a private standpoint, absolutely. And we really did it because we liked the networking part of it. We felt like we were bringing stuff to the table, in some case, education or content that people find valuable. So yeah. It's a fun time.
I've been with this company for over 8 years, and I tell Don I like being at the tip of the spear. So we continue to go around the country to learn about all the new technologies and the innovations that our manufacturers have. And then as we vet those internally, we get to introduce those to you. Clean and Green is a great opportunity to showcase many of those awesome solutions.
Yep.
Here, let's talk about Streambank.
Well, let's go right at it. So Streambank Stabilization, Streambank Stabilization, whatever you want to call it. It really runs the gamut, and many of you have probably dealt with some of this, but we're going to start at kind of the fundamental level, and that's biodegradable stuff, right? So here you see core logs. This is a good example. We've got a temporary erosion blanket. Now, albeit it's a coconut blanket, so 3 years lifespan. It's got a core log at it. We'll talk a little bit more about those, but that's 3 to 5 years. But at the end of the deal, vegetation by itself is going to overtake the erosion control responsibility. And vegetation is what we're looking for, right? So we also need to understand vegetation has its limits. And so obviously turf is pretty strong. Those are shear stress and velocity ratings. And this is something that is continuing to evolve in what some of these, especially these deep root vegetation, what they're capable of. But we just have to understand that this is some of our limits for this type of creek bank where we're just trying to use core logs. Here you can see some different sizes and densities. And that's really important too in specifying core logs because a 6-pound density log is not going to last as long as a 9-pound, but a 9-pound log, you're going to have a heck of a time putting a live stake through it. you're going to need more of a 6 pounds. So that there's longevity, there's what you're doing with it, and then the size also.
And we can
plays
help
into
them
it.
select that.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And that's what we're here for. Even to the idea of contour wattling, you think of wattling, you think of straw, but we use contour wattling with core logs because again, it's going to last way longer than the straw. It allows time for vegetation to have a spot to get vegetated within. It's going to do some stormwater management by slowing the water down, picking up sediment as it hits down to the creek, which is always a good thing. But again, it's just another example of core logs and how they're applied. Here's another one here that's more common is for the toe, like you saw in the first picture, or in a bench. Again, it's the idea is giving it some vegetative support. And then typically this is an example. This is actually an old picture. Look at that, 2003. But this was, you know, the idea was this creek's coming down there was eroding a lot of the underneath these trees. And what this core log will actually do is allow for sediment to build up behind it, actually allow that sediment to then help that tree to keep alive and healthy. And so again, there's just a variety of ways you can use core logs. And then this core log itself is a growing medium. So then, you know, plants will grow within it. And just like any other erosion control, you always want to think about the termination points, right? This termination point is at the end of it. And basically you just always want to turn the ends in. So if you have scour behind it, it doesn't undermine your solution.
And this is where I talked earlier on our practice run. This is a plan view looking down on top of the stream. Some people might look at that and think it's a profile that you're trying to key that in down below, but you're not. You're doing that with a stone. The rock will be towed in.
So biosol.
Oh, I would love to talk about biosol. That's one of our in-house. Can I have that?
You can.
Thanks. Or may I? Rocky Mountain Bioproducts. Biosol is the nutrient. This is the nutrient source to establish vegetation. What Don was showing there earlier, and I just want to back up a step. What we're talking about today with Streambank Stabilization is we're talking about some of the lighter, easier stuff on some of the smaller scale, or not the small scale, the lighter flows, easier channels, but we're going to progress all the way through to streambank, riverbank protection and how all these products work in harmony. So by the end, you'll hear us talk quite a bit about composite solutions. For the vegetated solutions, we have to give that vegetation a chance. A lot of these projects have had a lot of soil disturbance. There's been a lot of grading activity. So you may not have good black dirt with organic material right at the top. We got to provide some nutrients. So in order to do that, we have Biosol and Biosol Forte, which are our long-term, we almost call them permanent nutrient sources to get that vegetation established. Too many words on the screen. Years ago, Don and I said we're going to try to take text off the screen, but I left this slide in on purpose just to highlight that this is an organic fertilizer. This is plant-based. This is good for nature. This is not going to introduce any kind of leachates or pollutants or any contaminants into the water. This is all about water quality. So establishing vegetation by promoting soil life or soil health, but also improving that water quality by not only having vegetation established, but making sure that we're not overdoing it with fertilizers. In the ag world, and I live, I'm surrounded by corn and beans and livestock. In the ag world, you know, often fertilizer is a dirty word. That's not what this is. This is all natural.
Well, because it's not water soluble. So the biotics of the soil actually break down biosol that then release it over a period of time. So you're not going to get it leaching into your water, which then can cause algae and all the other stuff. Biosol won't do that.
Not at all. No, and biosol is just part of the solution. I'm going to skip this slide. I was going to circle that graph. The highest part of that graph just shows that there's a long-term release. That's the thing I want you to take away from this. This is a nutrient that's feeding the soil to create vegetated growth. This is one of two projects we'll show you here with before and afters. This is a 2-year difference. As you can see with the soil on the left, that's not really black organic material. That would have had a really hard time growing vegetation on its own. So to give it a boost, they added Biosol Forte, and you can see that that fed the soil, that feeds the plants, and you get not only the vegetation stand, but the water quality we've talked about. This is a creek realignment project. Critical that that gets some vegetation, reinforced vegetation would be good on some of the steeper slopes, but you got to make sure that for the larger storm events, the soil is protected. Here's one that's even a lot trickier. So steeper slopes, it's a Superfund site. What's that mean? It's toxic. There could be hazardous chemicals there. Really hard to get vegetation established. They use Biosol Forte, and as you can see in the 3-year after picture, this thing's fully vegetated, which is absolutely critical to protecting that exposed soil, which is now protected with vegetation, slowing the water down and providing that water quality that's absolutely required for Superfund sites. And not only Biosol, which is a nutrient source, we talk about biotic soil amendments.
Yeah, and so, you know, that's a whole nother conversation, get into profile products.
We'll do that later.
But Proganics is just something that can benefit the soil structure because it's got organic matter, et cetera. but it still needs a nutrient source. That's the value of biosoil.
And so the organics is a topsoil replacement. The biotic soil media is what they say, BSM.
Yeah, right. And,
there it is.
and there it is. So what it does, it helps build that revegetation platform. And it makes a more ideal growing environment. Again, it still needs a nutrient source. That's why you have biosol.
Yep.
But it helps with that, again, that long-term vegetation. It holds all that material in place, basically.
Which is huge for streambank stabilization.
Yeah, it's got biochar, mycorrhiza, all kinds of stuff in it.
Yeah, I think I was going to keep talking about that. I don't know. I handed that over to you for this slide. Jump the gun.
That's okay. So, again, we're talking about temporary stuff in the past, as far as the coconut blankets, the core logs, et cetera. Now we're looking at turf reinforcement mats, having permanent root reinforcement or stem reinforcement that then has long-term implications for shear stress and water velocity.
This 3D image is awesome.
This particular one is green armor. It's actually Incamat for the old folks to know what Incamat is. It's a really open TRM, which is interesting because then a lot of the natives that might have a steeper or a thicker stem coming out can get right through it. But then you basically glue it to the ground. It has staples in it, but you basically glue it to the ground with Flextera. And you could even put Proganics in before you did the Flextera.
Which is hydraulically applied.
Yeah, so it's hydraulically applied here, and you can imagine the strength of that when it's stapled to the ground and then glued to the ground. And then what you need to know with Flextera, which we're not going to get into today at all, but Flextera is a great growing medium also, that it's going to allow for moisture to stay with that seed, and you'll get this kind of vegetation.
Hugely popular.
Oh yeah, big time. There you can see that root reinforcement. You can imagine how much stronger that is in a hydraulic environment, because now you've got roots down deep that's going to do what you needed to do to hold that soil in place when you have a big stream event. And so go back to creek bank stabilization. Here you go.
Beautiful.
Now here's an example. Now, having this on the bottom, this is still probably considered a drainage channel because we're going to grow grass in the bottom of this thing as well. But again, it's a great solution. When you look at the vegetation, they've got some rock in areas where they felt like they needed some more protection. But again, a very green solution that allows for sediment to be settled out of the water, filtered out of the water, et cetera. So that is one TRM. And then we have North American Green that has the 3 TRMs we've talked about in the past. You got SC250, C350, P550.
Yeah.
We can also use those in a creek bank stabilization. Again, we got to think about that. We're more concerned about plastics maybe, so we have to think about that. But it's still very effective to help get native plants in many cases established on a slope. And we'll show you some examples here. This was actually a project originally was designed with riprap, and the contractor came to me and said, I can't get riprap to stay on this slope.
Good.
We decided to vegetate it. And so instead, again, this is kind of creek bank stabilization, but any of that scour that comes behind that culvert, we're protected with C350 in this particular case. And this is another kind of different example from necessarily stream bank, but this is lake edge treatment. But again, using TRMs, this is in Kansas. This is another old project. This has been around for a while, but it was very successful then, it's very successful now. So they regraded the slopes. They put down C350 down about 6 inches into the water. Then once they got done with the C350, they transitioned to just an erosion blanket. So they got vegetation on the slope above it. And then in some cases, they even planted some sedge plants in it. Here you can see like a further picture away. And now you can see a completed picture. There's with the sedges. They actually planted those, cut it through the TRM. And then again, a very successful project. How much nicer is this than having 6 feet wide of rock riprap that you're trying to walk on to get to the water's edge?
No, thanks.
Yeah, no, not at all. Just a reminder that for these TRMs, especially North American Greens, these are the shear stress ratings and comparing them somewhat to riprap. Again, you got to realize that, you look and you say 30 inches of riprap is comparable to SC250. Even if you looked at 30 inches of riprap compared to P550, P550 is probably about half the cost of installing 30 inches of rock. So there's some value in terms of the cost of it, but then also you got the vegetation advantages, all those other.
You can mow it if you want. You don't have to worry about debris catching in between the rocks. I mean, turf reinforcement mats offer a lot of benefits.
Yes, big time, big time. Here's another creek bank stabilization. They put some rock on that downhill side when they were really concerned about scour. But again, you can see it's taken a pretty good volume of water. Looks like the day after they installed it almost. We've done a lot of this here. This is actually a golf course. And it was in between 2 culverts. So we have a core log down at the toe. You can barely see it. 1 layer P550 where that shear stress is a little higher. And then up higher, we went to C350. Again, here gives kind of an after shot. Eventually, those core logs will also completely vegetate just with natural seeds that come through, or you could actually live stake it, that kind of thing, if you want to do that up front. This was an MSD project. Again, it was just a creek bank, C350. This is before they decided to use rock riprap for the toe. And here's the after. Again, good vegetation. That's going to be around for a very long time. It's going to the vegetation even protects the TRM from UV sensitivity, those kind of things. It's a long-term solution. And then this is another one that was a nice channel project. They actually did both sides of the channel eventually. All native plants were planted in these. Did great. They probably could have picked a little different rock than just normal gravel. But again, a great project, great solution, because even the toes were protected.
And if the citizens go jogging by that or out walking around with their dogs, once that's fully vegetated, they don't even know it's reinforced. It's an all natural look.
Yep.
But you're providing the reinforcement it needs.
Yeah, very good. Now this is a little different. So here they used a Gabion for a toe wall. We're going to talk about Gabions here in a minute. But the value of this Gabion is now it really has to have some significant scour before you could actually lose that toe. This is the water's kind of coming straight at it. Is one of the reasons. Also, the TRM that's on the slope is actually then attached to the Gabion, so that it's got a good attachment to the Gabion. It's also stapled in place, and you can see the vegetated picture there did very well. And then here's another version of it, just looking from a distance. But again, another golf course. I believe this one was in Kansas City. But great project, and we started doing more of these with this Gabion toe, just to make sure the toe was established. And then we also talked a little bit in some of our stuff about bioengineering and bioengineering 20 years ago, we kind of said, well, it looks like it's twigs and sticks, which it is. And in many cases, that's been very successful. Conservation departments specifically have been very successful in taking willows that are dormant upstream and protecting a slope. The challenge is what we think we've kind of come to is that you need some structure even in bioengineering. Because if there's $1 million building on the uphill side of that slope, now we need to make sure there is no chance of failure. If it's a conservation area and they lose a little bit, they put it back together, no big deal. So we're going to talk a little bit about bioengineering, but more about the structural elements. And like, for example, here, this is the start of composite revetment, which we'll see some more of in here in a minute. Here's just some plain live staking. Again, we've got structure at the toe. We've got a good, strong TRM on the slope, and then they put a lot of live stakes in it. And I wish I had an after picture, because I got to believe this thing has got to be about 10 foot tall and you can't see anything. Again, it's going to be a very natural look, but again, very successful. Here again is that composite revetment. Composite revetment has grid layers, basically like a burrito wraps, that then has live stakes or bare roots in it to get that vegetation going. Also has some rock with it, but it is a structure, and it does kind of then blend into the environment. So it ends up being a very environmental solution.
I think we'll have a couple more images similar to that as we get into it later.
Yeah.
What is that?
And that's a live stake. So we have done a lot of live stakes over the years. We supply Streambank projects with live stakes with bare roots. We can certainly give you recommendations on varieties that we've seen work well in the past. And again, it's just a great way to get something vegetated, and it can be fairly inexpensive because a live stake can be as cheap as $1. And in 2 years, it'll be a 4 foot, tall plant. So live stake can really be a good solution. So here's
Yeah, I'll talk about it briefly. High performance turf reinforcement mats. Really what we're talking about is getting into some, and there's a question on there, I think, getting into some anchored systems to get into the higher velocities, higher shear stresses. We're going to keep getting stronger and in protecting more critical areas as we go. We have a number of products that are considered high performance turf reinforcement mats, and then a number of the DOTs, because we're talking about 12 states. I know you see a lot of Missouri projects on here. That's just the guys that sent us pictures of their projects and the ones that we've most recently talked about. But in all of our locations, the DOTs have their own categories for turf reinforcement mats. We can help you make the right selections for those. Here's one example. We'll spend more time on this later. This happens to be ProPEX's Armor Max product. It's a really awesome solution that's anchored down and can take a lot higher velocities and shear stresses than most. And we have a full case study on this that's available on our website. And then we also have some of these imprinted literature, if you guys remember what that is, where you actually have handouts at some of our conferences like the IECA events, where we can have those available for your reading. If you guys have a project where you're considering some different solutions and you want our help, that's one of the ways that we can help you convince stakeholders, is with a lot of our successful projects we've had in the past, help tell the story.
I'll go back. Well,
No, go ahead.
the question was about biosol and its shelf life. As
That's
long as it is out of the water, and so it stays dry, not out of the water, but as long as it stays dry, the shelf life is much longer than a year that you're talking about, because they bought it in the spring of 22. Can they use it in the spring of 23? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's basically until the biotics start to, so basically until it hits the soil.
Yep.
And those biotics start to go after it. It's basically
not activated.
It's not. Yeah. There's no activation.
Yeah, it's not really. Yeah. So good question.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking. We went past the HPTRM, spent a little bit of time. We'll get more into those later. But as we start to talk about structural solutions, we got to talk about our vegetated wall system from Flexum SE. These bags are filled with on-site material. These are non-woven geosynthetic. They can be filled on-site, or they can actually be filled off-site and trucked to the site, depending on what works best for you. These don't have to be installed with heavy equipment. We have one right out in front of this building that I built with some of our members from our warehouse by hand, really easy to assemble. Every bag, every plate, they all interlock together, and it makes quite a strong system, as you see in that upper right-hand side. I have a few slides to show different applications where this could be used. I'll get more into Streambanks, but the whole point here is to show how it can fit, or it can match to existing topography and match all the contours, whether it be horizontal, longitudinal, vertical. And in this particular example, they even put the Flexum SE bags up and over a culvert. And as you look at it in the bottom right corner, I don't know if that looks like it's from Teletubbies or The Hobbit or what, but it's pretty cool. It looks all natural. You don't even know the bags are there once they're
vegetated. Chia culvert.
Chia. Hey, we did that 2 months ago.
We did. That's right.
So here's a stream bank. It's kind of a smaller stream that they used. And Don mentioned earlier, he likes the upper right corner. What'd they do to those bags?
They sprayed it with Flexterra. So
yeah.
Flexterra and seed, and boom, you're done.
Yeah, and look at the bottom left. I mean, you can't even tell their bags there.
Like we talked about with bioengineering, this is kind of another example.
Yep.
We have structure now, but we're still vegetating it. So
it looks all natural. It's not a concrete wall.
That's correct.
And here's another example of that. They use natives here. And on this particular example, I think they cut into the bags and plugged into the bags themselves. They also have examples of layering the live stakes or the bare root seedlings back into the wall. Mm-hmm. Flexum SE has really good design software. Trexiana, has really good design software on their Flexum SE website. You can access that through our ASP website, Quick Supply, Bowman, Cascade Geo, and there's a design tool in there, but they love to help. So there's a guy named Joel Kennedy who wants to come down and do lunch and learns with us. The owner Mike Calwert, they would love to do lunch and learn. So contact us if you want to learn more about Flexum SE. Here's another project. Can it survive cold weather? Yeah. The original product was made in Canada. So they've got a ton of projects up north of the border in Canada and all throughout the US. And they're really popular in the UK and Australia. They're all over the world. They can handle all kinds of climates. And the whole goal here is to have a vegetated solution, as you see in the picture on the right, it looks all natural. Now, not all of our projects are going to be vegetated. We'll talk on that a little bit later too, with some of the solutions we have. But people often ask if Flexum SE can handle really extreme wave action on lakeshore protection or in streams. It's not just the bags themselves that are there. They are tied back into the slope with GeoGrid, just as any MSE wall is. And those could be every 2 bags or every 3rd row and tied back with that GeoGrid, and they're all interlocked with the plates, which is patented. There's a hook that actually holds that plate from going out away from the GeoGrid, but it also ties hard to the GeoGrid to keep it up against the slope and makes all the bags interlock together. Once fully vegetated, you hardly know it's there.
GeoWeb. So you've heard GeoWeb maybe in the past. This does work for Creekbank stabilization as well. It's HDPE panels that are welded together like you see here. And basically it's a way to put on a slope, protect the slope. A couple things, especially if you need to add some topsoil to it. One of the terrible things with a slope, how do you add topsoil and expect it to stay there, right? Yeah. GeoWeb's a great thing for that.
Cellular confinement.
Cellular confinement. Cellular confinement is important with rock because then we can maybe even use a smaller rock size, but it has more velocity strength because it's confined. And that's really one of the values here of GeoWeb. In this, you can see here, now here they're actually putting soil on it. And if they're probably going to put some kind of a TRM on, or some kind of blanket at least on top of it. But cellular confined topsoil is better than just topsoil by itself because it's just not going to just flow down.
That's a massive slope.
That is a massive slope.
And what was holding that together? What were those orange
Oh,
lines?
they also have tendons in here. So those tendons, there's a attra clip that can go to that tendon, hold that whole geoweb down. It's just a good system. And again, they're talking about websites. They have another one that they can do a project set up for you, give you recommendations, all those kinds of
And
things.
they want to do lunch and learns, whether it be virtual or
Yep.
in person. Yeah, Presto's ready to help.
Yep. Where we see GeoWeb more in creek banks is where they do this stacked wall like you see here. Years ago, we used to put concrete in the bottom of these GeoWebs. Nobody wants concrete in their creeks anymore. But if you do these stacked faces like this, now you have a vegetated, steep solution. It can either be a steep wall or even a steep slope or a wall, either way. Here's some examples of them. Again, gives you some plantability because each of these little pockets, then you could either put a plug in or put some seed in to grow. Even if you wanted to, you could probably even spray with Flextera. Here's again another example of that. It's just, every one of those little pockets you see is a way to get something to grow in them. Here's another example where it can even do two-tiered and move one off to the side because again it's flexible. Typically we're using 3 or 4 cell panels wide, so that's kind of your tier, your tie back. But we also use GeoGrid to hold them back, that kind of thing when we get really tall.
More of an MSE wall.
Yeah, yep. But again, look at the vegetation.
That's awesome.
And then the last one in GeoWeb is they also have a system, and it's on their website, that you can use GeoWeb, and you can actually, once you have the GeoWeb installed, then you fill it with soil. You can actually put a TRM on top of it. Now it's stronger than either the GeoWeb by itself or the TRM by itself. It's a great solution because now each of these pockets are basically little 1 square foot pockets of soil that can't go anywhere.
Yeah, and that previous slide shows that attra anchor. This is part of the system that can be
Yep.
connected to the tendons.
With the
And then
tendons.
the attra key holds the cells open on each unit. It's awesome.
Yeah. So here's the testing that was done. They did full scale testing, which actually was C350 on it. So they bumped up to almost 16 pounds of shear for those two combined. And there's no other testing done, but we know that like a P550 would even do better than that.
Yeah.
But this can be a good solution as well. Here, this was a kind of a cool project. It wasn't really a creek bank. It was a very steep slope, and they weren't worried about it because they put a TRM on top of it.
Look at that, fully vegetated. That's awesome.
Yep. And then here's another ditch. So again, Presto does a great job of being help you with projects and get you design
A
materials.
lot of design support.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So transition mats, that's a category we created years ago through ASTM, and it's really grown in popularity. It's something between the turf reinforcement mats and then some of the heavier structural reinforcement that we'll get into a little bit later. North American Green Shore Max is one of the original transition mats. It's a rubber mat, so it's flexible, easily conforms to the surface. It can be anchored with staples, rebar, earth anchors. And the whole goal with this is trying to get vegetation to grow through it so you don't even see it. And then we also have InstaTurf, which is Shear Force 10 and Shear Force 12 from our friend Tim Lancaster. Shear Force 10 is a rolled product, looks like AstroTurf, the artificial turf, but it allows vegetation to grow up through it. So you get the full vegetated protection eventually, but you get immediate protection day one, immediately green with that Shear Force 10. Shear Force 12 is the panelized version. It sits on top of a rubber mat, similar to Shore Max. And then that gives you a little beefier transition at scour holes like outlets of culverts and some of the trickier transition areas. There's some hybrid solutions where Tim will recommend Shear Force 12 on the bottom and the toe and graduate up to the Shear Force 10. And from that, you can get into the turf reinforcement mats and erosion control blankets.
But all this stuff has been tested as well. All the InstaTurf stuff has been tested, and I think it was TRI.
Yep.
So they have shear stress ratings and velocity ratings.
And Tim Lancaster is ready to do lunch and learns
Yes,
as
he
well.
is.
So are our guys.
Yes, he
So
is.
we have samples of this with all of our salesmen. Hit us up and we'll tell you more about it and help you with design recommendations. Samples that are a little heavier, harder to carry around. We usually only do the 4 patty samples, are those of Fleximat. Everyone in our audience today is probably already very familiar with Fleximat. We've been wildly successful at that for several years. And Fleximat is a rolled product, as you see in that center picture. The concrete patties are manufactured as part along with the GeoGrid. In particular, I see that left picture we used on this slide is actually the yellow. That's the fire resistant version.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, most of the Fleximat you'll see is on the traditional black GeoGrid. I mean, it can be backed with non-woven geotextile, erosion control blanket, turf reinforcement mat. We'll help make that recommendation for your project. Comes in various roll widths and lengths, and all of our sales team are really comfortable talking about FlexMat and working with it. We can help you really quickly turn around a project design with support details from FlexMat themselves. This one, Don mentioned, a reminder to me earlier is to mention anchors, and I can't see it on this screen because our picture's up there.
Oh.
I added plus anchors. I just did it to where we can't
Okay,
see
good,
it.
good.
They have the cross plate.
Yeah,
cross T.
this one's pretty steep, so they wanted
Yeah.
to make sure that this FlexMat stayed in place. So they actually anchored, it looks like, every 3 or 4 feet.
Yeah, they'll use those compression earth anchors.
Yeah.
And rather than use a round disc at the top of that, they use a metal cross that goes in between the FlexMat patties, fits right in the grid, basically disappears, but it really holds that into place. And we got a variety of anchors available in different anchor lengths, whatever you need for your site. And this particular one, you're getting some side slopes vegetated. On the bottom, if it doesn't vegetate, don't worry about it. If there's sediment deposits on that, it actually starts to look like a natural stream bank over time. But if there's ever a major storm event that's going to take that sediment away, it's not going to remove the FlexMat. It's going to stay in place. Particularly if on the leading edge, you get that keyed in like that they recommend. The manufacturer has really good details on that. Yeah. And we do pre-construction meetings to make sure the contractor knows how to install it. In this example, they've grout filled that trench at a transition from concrete to FlexMat. And just over time.
It's a good looking channel.
Good looking channel. And that's it, fully grown. It's awesome. You can't tell, but that's very well reinforced. It's not going anywhere.
That's right. So going back to, we talked about burrito wraps a little bit. We've done a lot of that in our bioengineering world. The one in the middle there is literally just BX 1100 geogrid with a coconut mat and then wrapping a burrito of soil. And then once they got that all done, then they stuck live stakes in it. I have actually seen this site, not since this, after this picture, and it vegetated very well. Again, willow stakes just grow like crazy. Willow stakes, buttonbush, there's a few others. But that can be a simple way. Now it's much more natural, right? There's not any fine lines to it. Some people like the one on the left. It's more, distinct, and that's just using some forms to create that structure that you see while you're building a reinforced slope. And same with on the right. And there's a variety of ways to do this.
Some like to use the wire face.
Like the wire face here. This just got rock in it. That was actually a road closure because of a channel below it. Or on the one on the right is just a steep slope. That's not, it looks like there's a pond in front of it. But again, now you don't have, especially like you see on the one on the right, you don't have the expense of the concrete block. Really all you have to do is some simple protection on the face of it and then vegetate it. So those are some good options again. To transition from that, now this is hard armor, and this is something a lot of people haven't talked about. Gabions aren't getting used like they used to. Still something that I've recommended because for some specific reasons, there's really not a whole lot that does better. And I'll explain that here in a minute. There's two different kinds. There's a twisted wire mesh. That's one of my favorites because even if you break a wire, the thing doesn't fall apart. If you lose one or two of the welds on a welded wire, potentially you're going to have some issues. But as you can see here, we can do mechanically stabilized earth, gravity walls, all that kind of stuff with Gabion mesh. And we're going to talk a little bit about those more. So that bottom one on the right is how you would see a Gabion when it showed up, shipped to you from us. You actually create it, put it into that box with hog ring guns or twisted wire to make it look like it does on one of the two on the right or on the left. Then once you have that, now you put Gabions together empty so that they're one continuous structure. Again, you either use rings or mesh to then create a Gabion that then you're going to fill with rock. Really important that you think about the sizes. There are standard sizes. It's important to use these sizes as much as possible because this keeps it cost effective. If you tell me you want a 2-foot Gabion, we can probably do that, but you're probably going to pay the same amount as a 3-foot Gabion. It's just going to take more work on the manufacturing end. So keep these in mind. Again, we can certainly help you with those, and we have brochures and stuff on that as well. But this is the result, right? This is a nice contoured wall that moves with the water design, but is long-term protection, especially if it's PVC coated. We'll talk about that in a minute too. Why are Gabions even worth talking about? Because of these 5 things. They're flexible, they're permeable, they're a monolithic structure, they're strong, and they have an ecological advantage, and we'll explain that. First, the flexibility. Like that earlier picture, you can do the natural lines, and you can put angles to them, whatever you want to do with Gabions, because it's very flexible before you put rock in it. The other big one is even if you have some subsurface settlement or some differential settlement, more than likely this slope is not going to fail. It's just maybe not going to look as pretty as you wanted it to, but it has great flexibility, can blend and move as the ground moves. Permeability is critical. How many walls have you seen because that failed because of a water issue?
Hydrostatic pressure.
Water can come up and down in a creek. Water can go both ways. It's going to have a fabric behind it, so we have something that keeps the soils that's over on the right side from getting into the Gabion. But that way we don't have hydrostatic pressure exactly. So permeability is very important. Monolithic, again, because I explained that every Gabion, one Gabion is attached to the one next to it, attached to the one behind it, attached to the one in front of it. It becomes one giant Gabion. So that's the strength. That, and then also there's the strength of the rock that makes Gabions very strong. And for the, rock is natural to a certain extent, obviously, and it just is a very strong solution. Again, I said this earlier, got to do PVC coated Gabions. There's testing that was done, and if you do a galvanized Gabion in a creek, it might only last 3 to 5 years. PVC coated accelerated aging test, I think, puts it out to 75 years or something like that. So PVC coated is critically important to the success of a Gabion. And then ecological. Again, like I said, rock is somewhat nature, so you can blend nature with the rock. Here we're actually creating that environment by putting soil with it. The one on the right, we actually, before we put the lids on, we put soil down, put seed down, put a temporary blanket down, then put the lids down. So we got something to grow immediately. This was actually there. This was up in Milwaukee, where they actually had some kind of fish that was important to this creek. So they wanted it vegetated, because vegetation does a couple things. It keeps the water from getting too hot because it can shade the water, but also provides habitat, which is important. Installation, again, we can do a couple things with Gabions here. This was kind of a pilot project where they did dirt and soil. There's probably too much dirt here. The one that really worked out well was this one. Here they realized that if they have a 48-inch stone, which is standard for Gabions, there's probably about a 30% void space. So let's do 30% rock, 70% rock, 30% soil, and then that still has the same weight, because again, it's mostly a ballast. And this gave us good weight, but allowed us soil to then be able to have something to grow. Again, here's your standard Gabion wall. This is what we see all day, every day in creek banks. That's very successful. And the last one really I have, well, talking about design. There is a lot to a design. You can't just say, oh, let's put Gabions. You have to look at the different soil layers on the backfill, the steepness, the foundation layers, so you have bearing capacity. All those things play into then the thicknesses of each row of Gabions and what it's going to look like.
And that seasonal high water table is where the permeability is important too, to make sure you have some way to drain out the water behind it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are design programs that we can assist you with or get copies of for you to do yourself, so that you can then get a structural stability or global stability. All
it's
those
easy for
of
you
things.
to say.
I know it is easy. But it's no different than any other wall, right? They're looking at overall failure. They're looking at foundation capacity, sliding, overturning, and internal failure. Most of the Gabion softwares all will make sure that what your safety factor is for each of those conditions.
And what we talked about earlier is we're not competing with engineers. We're not taking their place. With that previous slide that shows equations, we work in harmony with project engineers, and we can even put them in touch with geotechs and make sure everybody's on the same page. We're not doing the design and stamping the plans.
Absolutely not. We can give you recommendations.
Yeah.
For sure. Yep. And one of the other things I think most people don't realize when they see a Gabion wall, this is typically what it looks like. There's the base is going to be much wider than the top. And that's just makes sense structurally that, you
stability.
You want to have strength. And that's how the software will design it based on that. And then one last thing is specifically to stream banks. This scour apron is really a good solution as opposed to burying an entire Gabion. There was a job years ago. They actually were chipping out bedrock to put a Gabion. Yeah, it was kind of crazy because it's like, well, I think that bedrock probably took care of it. But here, that's an alternative. You can do the scour protection. So as it might get undermined at the very front of it, it will end up coming to a spot that it gets settled and the wall doesn't get touched.
And some people call that bottom design, the bottom two slides, self-healing.
Yeah.
So if there is going to be some natural change in that grade, it'll match that slope.
Here's a live picture of that as well. And lastly, as far as gabions, we can do MSE wall designs. This is actually utilizing the gabion mesh as the reinforcement, the bottom of the gabion, the front and the top. So that's all one piece. Then it's filled with rock and then backfilled with whatever you designed the structural infill for. But it can be a less expensive solution. This day and age of labor being so expensive, now you're only filling one gabion and not all the gabions underneath of it. Can be, usually you got to be about a 12-foot high wall, maybe with labor costs being higher, maybe it's 9 now, I don't know. But again, a great solution. These are readily available as well.
So Streambank, this whole thing's been about Streambank stabilization. And as you can tell, as we go through this progression, there's sometimes where we kind of seems like we skip ahead or we go back. It's because a lot of these solutions work in harmony together. And for every application, you might need a little bit of one and a lot of the other, or vice versa, or none of one and all of one of the other solutions. So we're trying to touch on all of them in just 1 hour. I see it's 1:11. We're doing 1:11 Central. We're doing great on time. Don's going to look at a question here online, but with the Propex scour lock wall, Don mentioned about having different liners through the gabion before you fill that with material. That's what Propex has done here. They basically take a HESCO basket, and this is lined with a turf reinforcement mat. And as this system's filled with either on-site soil or rock, and they'll help with that design recommendation, this becomes, and I mentioned earlier that this can be vegetated, and it really can be. Like you start to see the one on the bottom right starting to vegetate. If it's not vegetated, they still say they have 75 years.
75 years, yeah.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you have a question you want to ask before I keep
It's
going?
very involved. We're going to
Okay.
put that as our,
Good.
we're going to do
We'll
those.
get to it. Yeah, keep them coming. We're going to answer all of the questions in writing, and
Yeah,
every
exactly.
attendee gets them.
Exactly.
So we
So we'll answer it, but it's more involved than
Yeah,
we'll
that's
talk about it.
good question. Good job. Why don't you schedule a lunch and learn if you're going to get that involved? We'll answer all your questions, and I'll come in person or we'll be joining you virtually. I love involved questions. Keep them coming. Use the Q&A feature, folks. There's a couple pictures here that I wanted to share of a project not far from here that our very own Ed Nelson, shout out to Ed Nelson for taking great pictures and going the next step and providing the great pictures to us here. Madeline Drury, our marketing genius, is really good at putting together the case studies and getting this information out on LinkedIn. But Ed sent me these pictures. We talked about it at length yesterday. He has vast experience with scour lock and has had great success with it. This is the installation and the assembly before they filled them. There's two different projects here. The one on the left, you can see they're filling with on-site material. The one in the center, they're filling with aggregate, and that's going to be project specific. It's what you have available. It's what your needs are on site. It's what you can do to make it fit the natural
You're
site.
probably exactly right. I bet it's more about availability than
Yep. And what we really like about this system is it's trying to fit, and Don mentioned this with the gabions, trying to match the natural stream alignment, or if you're realigning a creek, to try to satisfy the designer's contours and curves. A lot of thought goes into that design. As this system gets filled and continues to stack up, everything Don just said about the previous slide still holds true. This particular case has not only the stream bank protection down at the toe of the slope, but a massive slope up above it. I mean, you can't hardly tell, but in that left picture, you see how high they are versus the trucks that are on scene. This is all part of stream bank stabilization. It's got to start at the toe. You've really got to protect that channel section at the bottom, but you got to work your way all the way up the slope. You're not going to line gabions all the way up to the top of a slope like this, or even scour lock. So in this case, they use scour lock at the bottom. They ran up the slope with Propex Armor Max that I introduced a little bit earlier. And the anchoring is critical. Let Propex and their engineers, my buddy Ben Campbell, all of them love doing lunch and learns. They love helping design projects. Let them help us help you with the recommendations of anchor spacing, types of anchors to use. This can go everywhere from staples all the way up to the earth anchors.
Great project.
Oh, and the earth anchors with Pyramat, this Armor Max solution is so awesome. Now, once this is installed on that steep slope on the left, on the top left, there's a tan piece of equipment. Can you tell what they're getting ready to do there?
Well, I know this project.
Yeah.
First, they were putting on Proganics and seed, then they put FlexTerra on top of it.
That's awesome. So the bottom left, good job, Don. You get a star for the day. The bottom left, you can see they're starting to shoot right on top of that slope.
Yeah.
So that had been soil covered, and they had the Proganics on that on top.
Yep.
So that's what covered it as a topsoil.
That's why you
replacement.
see the brown in that.
That's the brown. And now on the right, what do we have? Vegetation on a steep slope. And it looks like people are down wading in the river. I don't know what they're doing.
Catching crawdads.
Hard armor. You want to talk about hard armor, crawdad?
Hard armor. We're not going to get into length about this because this is a whole nother seminar.
And I didn't know that was articulated concrete block on the left.
Yeah, there was actually something that was developed as a spillway. It's an articulated block, but it's a tapered block. It's actually performed very well, but it's the only place I've ever seen it done. But articulated block is something when you really have a lot of flow, you really can't handle vegetation, or if vegetation might be a side product of it. But this is stuff where we're talking, you know, the difference is when they test articulated block, failure is if it rises more than 1/4 of an inch or something. Like it's tested very differently. It's very strong stuff. This is when you really have some serious flows and failure is like can't happen.
And we have different options available.
Oh gosh, yeah. There's 4, 6, 8 inch. There's different types and thicknesses, etc. So a lot of stuff to work with there.
Oh,
back to you with muscle wall.
Muscle wall. This is awesome. This particular project is shoreline protection. So I cheated and put Streambank/shoreline on purpose. This has sand backfill behind it. It's providing a beach surface, but we're talking about muscle wall also. Don and I talked about this in preparation for today's webinar as a temporary solution too. So as part of your Streambank stabilization project where you're going to do construction, sometimes you got to hold the existing stream or river away from that site so you can get down in there and work. Muscle wall has some really awesome solutions for that. In fact, they have some Army Corps of Engineers testing down at Vicksburg, Mississippi. They are the only 4-foot flood protection device that's reached approval, full height, water depth, and has the impact test. And they're the only 4-foot solution that's approved by Army Corps of Engineers. FM Global is now recommending it for a lot of the properties they protect on shorelines and coastlines for insurance protection for flooding for buildings. In fact, they're even encouraging a lot of building owners to have muscle wall on site ready to deploy in their own facility so they don't have to call and have it delivered. So it's filled with water on the top, and when you're done using it, there's a drain plug on the bottom. So
we're talking about flood protection, or Bill is, but understand that one of the reasons we want to put this in there is this is a great product to help build a creek bank stabilization when you have water, because you can literally de-water a slope of a creek to be able to do what you need to do to it. And then you can take it away, and no issues.
If only I had a video to show them, then they'd really see.
Gosh, I don't know, where would you see a video?
Let's see. Oh, dang, you're supposed to go automatically. There it is. I have the audio turned down.
So this was actually for a bridge.
Manitou Springs, Colorado.
Yeah, creating a bridge there, but they used muscle wall to divert the channel, which worked out really well. You could also, instead of this bridge, you could be doing both sides of the creek channel.
Yeah,
doing the same thing.
And this is one where it's kind of narrow, so they were able to put. And thank you, Ryan Anderson from Bowman Construction Supply, and Tyler Searle from Muscle Wall, my buddy. Thank you guys for providing this video and some others. But they put the muscle wall down on both sides. The muscle wall connects together with a joint, and there's a pivot point there. And then they tie them together with ratchet straps, and then they laid a roll of liner material on top, walked it down the site, stepped it down, and as they stepped it down at the leading edge, water flowed on top of it. They were able to have the liner go over the muscle wall on either side, and they have these large clips that go down over top of the muscle wall and hold that liner in place. And this stayed, it was supposed to be for days. You know, weather made it difficult for the contractor to get in and out of the site, not muscle wall's fault, but they ended up staying there for weeks. And then when they were done getting the repair done on the sides and doing the bridge construction, then they were able to pull this out and go right back to the natural stream. I have another video for a different application. This is the one that's post wildfire. Not only flood, but debris comes washing down the mountain.
Yeah, the amount of debris coming through is crazy.
And this saved a homeowner and their horse barn and their property from getting wiped out from flash flood coming down off a mountain. I wish I had the audio.
And that's the thing about these western states, you know, that they get these rain events that they're not used to having. It takes all kinds of debris with them.
And there's a tremendous amount of flow that comes down and impacts this, but muscle wall didn't budge. It protected the property very successfully. Here's another one, same property, a little bit further downstream to show how wild this was. Pretty scary for a homeowner, and they need protection. So when we talk Streambank stabilization, this system here has some horsepower.
No doubt.
Composite system.
Composite system. So, you know, we've kind of talked about that a little bit throughout. That one of the reasons that we feel like we bring value to the table is that we don't just have one solution, we have several. And many times what really is the benefit is when you can combine several parts of what we talked about today and put them all in one. And that's what we're going to talk about briefly here. This was actually a project I believe this was in Omaha, where they used core netting as a reinforced slope, but they also had a scour issue. So what they did is they actually had shore max for the scour protection, had a reinforced slope on that around the culvert pipe, but then they actually transitioned to
Like GeoWeb over there in the bottom right.
it might be, but the other one is the green armor system then was used in the channels going down. So again, that's I think that's part of why. Oh, this is GeoWeb. You're right. This is GeoWeb that's wrapped in core.
Wow.
And then with Shoremax.
Not wow that I was right, but wow, that's a creative solution.
It is. It is. Here's another one. All right. So we talked about articulated block. This particular one is armor lock. So it's a hand placed block that basically we just filled with gravel, minus basically. But then we built a reinforced slope above it that was bioengineered. So now they're getting ready for the side slopes. Here you can see they're completed. So those are kind of like burrito wraps. We did have a little form to them to get them to the right height. Now it's interesting, Bill, I didn't tell you this. The one mistake we made here was every one of these plants died.
I'm glad you didn't tell me. I would have told you not to mention it.
The reason being is this grid hurt is the bad word, ruined every one of those live stakes, the cambium layer. It couldn't produce because it was stopping anything from getting
Cambium layer?
The cambium layer of a live stake. So the great news is what we did is we just put new live stakes in it. That again, these are the ones that are put in there. You can see some of them are actually trying to live.
I love lessons learned.
They didn't live very well. But what we did then is we came back through, we put live stakes in because again, it was just dirt and core netting with BX 1100. We restaked it. And this was, I think this was like 3 years later.
And so whatever you did the second time worked better with the GeoGrid. You didn't have that issue that you had
Right.
with the original.
Correct. Because yeah.
What I was going to say is this looks like something Melissa Hurley would like. So being out in Oregon, they really do. I think that's when people used to say bioengineering. I thought that's not going to work in the Midwest. That's a Oregon thing.
Sure.
But they really do care about vegetated solutions. But now it's gone all over the country. It's not just Oregon.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, we see bioengineering everywhere. This one is probably the epitome of the number of different products all at one time. So you can see we talked about GeoWeb that's stacked for a wall. Underneath of it is a Gabion structure, so it's going to take care of the scour. On the right side, you can't really see, but there's a product called Ajax and then a TRM. And I think, oops, oh, that picture is gone. I had one that rolled up. If you really look back there in the back, you can see the Ajax a whole lot better. So again, this was just something we worked with the engineer to figure out what made the most sense. And I think this was actually also an application where the engineer wanted to try some different things and see how they would work. In this particular case, they all work great.
I think you got rid of that one that had the Ajax that you did locally that ended up getting blown out that was tied together.
Oh, yeah, that's a power water. We didn't have that one.
Yeah, no, we did originally. Yeah. So in talking about that, because we're doing well on time, doing good. You're using fancy words and I'm talking like I'm from a gravel road in southern Iowa. Because I am. But on that particular project, I just want to talk a little bit about it while this is up on the screen. It was one that you said you spent a lot of time on it and you went out and tied the Ajax together. And
it explains the power of water, and a lot of you probably already know the power of water.
Power of water.
And I didn't have an experience like I did with this one. So there was a grade control beam, right, that was protecting storm sewer. And it probably stuck up probably 1 inch to 2 inches above the bed bottom.
No big deal.
Think big deal, right? Well, it consistently started to build a scour downstream of it. So we took these Ajax, we put I think there's a whole truckload of Ajax in just this one scour hole. Then we took cables and tied cables to every 5 of them. And then this 5 was connected to this.
You're supposed to grab it and go, that's not going anywhere.
Oh my gosh. And then we even put rock on top of that. So then it didn't even look like you could see it.
Perfect.
Right? And they had a rain event like within a month that literally we probably found 50 blocks of Ajax. All the rest were gone. And there was a scour hole that was probably 6-7 foot deep.
That's amazing. Power of water.
It is the power of water.
And the Army Corps of Engineers and engineers for centuries have been trying to win over water, but we keep learning Mother Nature always wins.
Well, one of the big ones that I learned what laminar flow was and the importance of laminar flow, and what that grade beam did.
That little bit of turbulence.
It created the laminar flow wasn't happening anymore. And so then the solution was to get it back in laminar flow. Then the water just goes down there. It doesn't matter how fast it is, as long as you have protection and you don't have that hydraulic jump.
The hydraulic jump, exactly. Yeah. One of the things that one of the reasons I mentioned it, we're doing well on time. We'll get into these last few slides, is because despite our best efforts, sometimes things fail. one of the things that we've had the benefit of is a lot of experience. You saw at the beginning of this presentation, we have a lot of experience in our company, but we all get to talk to each other. So one person in our company might have a vast amount of experience with scour lock. Someone else might have a ton of experience with Gabions, and we can share that knowledge. So we get together regularly and share that knowledge. Keep your questions coming, especially the hard questions, and let us come talk to you in person. Because when we come talk to you in person, there's so much more opportunity to just have dialogue and get into this. So we have a variety of solutions we can offer you. There's no one size fits all. We have a lot of wonderful manufacturers that work with us, and they want to do this series. Some of them have already been calling, texting, emailing, saying they want to be our technical talks or guest speaker next spring. We're going to talk about our schedule and start to get some of that on the calendar. But we always have them available for lunch and learns. Like I said, whether they're virtual, which we've done a lot of with COVID, or we can set something up in your office in person. I love being there in person. I know our sales team does too. Sometimes it's a bit of both, or one or the other. We might only have one sales rep that comes to your office. I'll join virtually, and so will a manufacturer, not only to do a lunch and learn, but to discuss a project. My favorite part of any live presentation is to then hear your challenges, and then we talk and share ideas how to fix it. That's why I became an engineer, is to help solve problems.
You were asking questions.
Yeah.
So the question was about sustainable sites related to the LEED building and all that stuff. When that first came out, many of our manufacturers they were asking for documentation. Many of them put together a lot of that stuff. We haven't seen it in the last few years because it seems like, at least on our end of it, some of that we haven't been as involved in that. But yes, if specifically when you're asking what type of products you're looking for, we will certainly find that information for you, because there's a lot of it available, whether it's carbon footprint, that's gotten to be a big deal. But then what does it save? You know, like Proganics talks about how much truckloads of topsoil you're saving by using Proganics. And so we can get you a lot of that.
Yeah, we have a lot of information. Mostly those are architects that are doing that. It's usually building related, and they're trying to get a certain rating through LEED.
Right.
Then they want to include the site and get the points there. I had a couple contractors ask about it last week because they have not seen or heard anything LEED for quite a while, but we're ready to help you with that information. As you need it, reach out to us. We're at the contact information you see on the screen right there. Or go to our website, contact your local ASP Quick Supply Bowman or Cascade rep. They'd love to hear from you. We love helping people.
If you go to the website, you can do the contact us page that goes directly to Madeline Drury, she will then connect you exactly to the person you need.
She does, and she often copies me on that. So if she assigns it to somebody in one of our other offices, I often get to see those.
Yep.
The bottom of this slide says, what projects can we help you with today? Reach out to us, let us know. That's where you get the value from this. A little bit of learning. You're all going to get a PDH certificate if you respond to the survey that Madeline will send you right after this webinar. But the next level is let us actually help you. Hey, technical talks. I have another special guest that I'll be talking to, and I'll make that announcement after this webinar on Wednesday, December 7th, Geosynthetic Solutions. You're going to want to tune in for that. It's someone who's never been a guest. No offense to Don. He's been a guest a couple of times. I'm very excited. I'm going to go to a different location.
Very knowledgeable of geosynthetics.
Very knowledgeable person. Much more enjoyable to listen to than me. So I'm looking forward to it. Stay tuned, and we'll send an announcement out about that. And what did we say at the beginning of this?
Clean and green.
It's back,
we are
baby.
So excited to get this back in action. We had to cancel it in 2020. We're back at it full force. Like you've seen for the Midwest, we're doing 4 cities in 4 days. And then the following week, we're doing Portland and Denver. Should really be a lot of fun for one thing. You have a chance of winning a prize. I believe there might be something to that. We're always counting on a good lunch, but also some good content. And again, we'll have a bunch of our vendors there that will be exhibitors that can tell you everything that you need to know about them.
Probably all the manufacturers we mentioned today will have someone there, and you'll be able to come at them with your good hard-hitting questions, be able to network with them. They'll have giveaways as well. You don't have to go to all 6 of those cities. We do. We do. Don and I do. You don't.
Not a good idea.
You just pick whichever one's closest for you. But we have to go. We get to go to all of those. So yeah, you'll see Omaha, Des Moines, Kansas City, and St. Louis in 1 week. And then the following week, we'll do Portland and Denver. Super excited about those. All the information comes through the newsletter. If you're not getting those, let us know. Madeline will get you on the list.
Also, I believe, I have not done this, but we now have a clean and green website. I wish I had it in my head, but I think if you just Google clean and green and one of our companies, it'll pop up. It'll have a QR code that goes right to the registration page. All those kind of things, very simple.
Or call
and
us
if nothing else, go to one of our websites, do the contact us, and Madeline Drury will get you everything you need.
Nailed it. You're awesome. Thanks.
You got to sing for the next 3 seconds.
No, we're done. That's it. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.